Welcome to QP Only Ironman, a unique Ironman account where I can only train skills when I'm near a quest objective for my current quest. In this video I'll be explaining the rules of my account to remove any ambiguity when it comes to how my account works, so if you want to skip ahead to the actual progress videos, simply click the card in the top right corner to skip ahead to the first progress video. Now that the first couple of episodes are done, I've found that some parts of my rules are not always clear, or some things were just not specific enough in my original rules. So that's why I'm making this sort of episode 0 prequel to explain the rules more in depth. Now let's start with the original intentions of this account. I like additional challenges that arise when locking your account to a specific rule set, and because of that I wanted to make my own unique Ironman. I also think quests are the best part of RuneScape, so I decided to make a quest only account. The way I envisioned it was that as long as I'm able to see my next quest goal, I'm allowed to train my stats, and otherwise I'm not allowed to train any skills. To make sure I wouldn't just start all quests and be able to skill near the objectives of multiple quests at once, I also decided I can only do one quest at a time, so no unlocking fairy rings before I can complete Fairy Tale Part 2. To explain the rules to my account, I'll be defining two key parts of the following description of my account. I'm only allowed to gain experience within reach of my next quest objective. Here I'm going to define what within reach means and what defines a quest objective. First off, what counts as within reach of a quest objective? For this I count anything that is within one minimap's distance of a quest objective. In other words, if my quest objective is visible on my minimap, I'm allowed to gain experience, and otherwise I'm not. It still counts when the quest objective is simply a floor higher or lower while still being within one minimap's distance. For example, when the Lumberj's Cook is my quest objective, the spinning wheel in Lumberj's Castle is still within range. Dungeons do not work the same as above ground floors though, so in order to access content in a dungeon, I would have to have an objective within that dungeon. Also, for other realms that have the entrance within sight, the whole realm counts as within sight. This applies to the runecrafting altars, crop circles to Puro, and any other entrance to another realm. It also applies to any instanced areas, such as POH, temple tracks, the fight cave, etc. Because otherwise it would be impossible to define where they occur exactly, and also it would make training construction and runecrafting near impossible. Note that this same rule doesn't apply to things like the portals in the Wizard's Guild though, because those portals lead to the main map of RuneScape, which is clearly not another realm. Secondly, and more importantly, what counts as a quest objective? For my rules I distinguish 4 types of objectives. Either NPCs to talk to, items to gather, scenery to interact with, or monsters to kill. Let's go by them one by one. An NPC to talk to can simply be any NPC that is required to talk to in order to progress the quest. Examples are talking to the Lumberj's Cook to start and finish the Cook's Assistance quest, talking to Ned to have him make you awake, and more situations during almost any other quest. This is one of the most common things to be a quest objective, so I assume you guys understand. Another kind of objective could be to collect some kind of item. This can be having to search a crate, dig in some spot, to process an item in a specific location, or gather an item from a spawn location. Respective examples of this are getting the key during the waterfall quest, digging up the head during Creature of Frankenstrain, grinding up flour in a windmill during Cook's Assistant, or grabbing Dougal leaves from Gertrude's house during Gertrude's Cat. Since these are all location based, the location of searching, digging, processing or spawning of the item counts as the objective I need to stay near in order to be allowed to train my skills. Notably, I did not want to include stores as an objective because I didn't want to include every general store as an objective during any quest requiring a chisel or tinderbox or something, or every fishing store when you need a feather. An item that can be directly turned into a required item can also count as an objective. For example, wheat can also be counted as an objective if I need to have a pot of flour, but it cannot be counted as an objective if I need a red berry pie. That is because the red berry pie needs multiple steps of processing after collecting the wheat. Next up, in some quests, an objective can be to interact with some kind of scenery. The entirety of the piece of scenery to interact with then counts as the quest objective. Examples of this are repairing the fence during Dwarf Cannon, fishing from the fishing spot during Fishing Contest, or milking a dairy cow during Cook's Assistant. The final category of quest objectives is monsters to kill. For this category, I distinguish 2 subcategories: quest boss monsters and monsters with unique drops. First off, a quest boss monster includes monsters like the monsters fought in Fight Arena or the Moss Giant fought in Roving Elves. But it also includes monsters that are a specific part of a quest, such as the ghasts you have to kill during Nature Spirit or the ice trolls you have to kill during the Vermanic Isles. The monsters in this subcategory need to be killed but are not killed for their loot. The other subcategory is monsters that are killed for their loot, or more specifically for their unique drops. Now this is the most complicated part of the rules. I wanted to make this rule to make it possible to kill imps during imp catcher and kill goblins during goblin diplomacy, but I also wanted to include the 4 animals I would need to kill during druidic ritual and the monsters that drop bones for the rag and boneman quests. I didn't however want to include drops that are not at all unique, such as ashes, bones, coins, fishing bait, feathers or any items like that. The problem with the list of items I wanted to include is that some items such as the meats are 100% drops, while others such as the beads and goblin mail are not. Furthermore, the meats are not just dropped by their respective animals, but also by monsters such as werewolves and some other monsters around RuneScape. I would still consider a chicken the monster that has raw chicken as its signature drop, however, so I had to come up with a consistent and objective way to classify this as a unique drop. So after thinking for a long time, I think the best rule to apply is as follows. First, we group the monsters into categories, which are the same as the categories used by Slayer Masters. If a monster is not assigned as a Slayer task, it's in the same category as identical monsters. So for example, a man and a woman are counted as the same monster because every aspect about them is the same. Then I'm allowed to count a monster as an objective if one of 2 rules apply. If the required item is not a 100% drop from any monster, there must be at most 2 categories of monster that drop the item. This applies to the goblin mail, which is dropped by either goblins or hobgoblins, and it also applies to any monster dropping a bone for rag and bone men. If the required item for the quest is a 100% drop from a monster, there can be at most 2 categories of monsters that have this same 100% drop. The difference between this rule and the previous condition is that in this case we ignore any monster that doesn't have the item as a 100% drop. So for example, this would allow me to get a raw chicken by either killing a chicken or a rooster, or by killing the evil chicken. In this case that means I can ignore the ham members, the werewolves, the imps, etc. If this 100% rule would not be there, chickens would not be counted as an objective while getting a raw chicken, because there are many other monsters such as imps and ham guards that also sometimes drop a raw chicken. Like in the case of having to gather an item, this would also apply to items that can be directly turned into the required item. So for example, I would be allowed to kill cows if my objective is to get some leather. Now originally I only wanted to have one exception to these rules for my account, with that exception being that for every quest point I obtain, I get a kind of credit of 50 XP I'm allowed to use outside of reach of any quest objective. This is to make it possible to complete achievement diaries. After doing some Slayer training though, I found out that it was possible to get stuck training Slayer if I get a task from Turiel which I could not do during any quest. That would mean I can't cancel the task in any way, but I also can't ever do a quest that allows me to kill the monster to finish my Slayer task. Also, locking my account out of Slayer altogether, if this happens, would also lock my account out of the quest Scape because Slayer is a requirement for some of the quests. To solve this, I made another exception which would make it possible to complete the Slayer task if it would be otherwise impossible. Whenever I am on a Slayer task and I have to kill monsters outside the range of my quest objective, I can still choose to kill the monster in a way gaining as little experience as reasonably possible. So I must kill the monster by either hitting it once and then recoiling it down, or poisoning it and not hitting it after it's been poisoned. I should also try to make sure my max hit is as low as possible, for example using beers to drain my strength. Also, whenever possible, I must try to kill the lowest level version of the monster to limit the Slayer experience I gain. I also can't pick up any of the loot from the kills I get, unless I take a 100 experience penalty on my exception counter to prevent losing out on extremely rare items. This makes doing Slayer tasks in this way so discouraging that I would rather skip the Slayer task if at all possible, but would still make it possible to complete the Slayer task outside of reach of a quest objective as to not lock my account out of Slayer altogether. To recap, I consider one of these a quest objective. Any NPC I need to talk to, any item I need to collect, any piece of scenery I need to interact with for a quest, any monster either being one of 2 types of monster dropping a required item, or being one of 2 types of monsters that has some required item as a 100% drop. I do not consider a skill requirement to be a quest objective though, so if I need a skill for a quest I must have trained it either during previous quests, or I must be able to train the skill during the quest near an actual objective of the quest itself. Some notable final things to specify are these. Both mini-quests and recipe for disaster sub-quests have their own rewards, so they are counted as separate quests. After completing Underground Pass, I must also complete Regicide right away, because that quest automatically gets started sometime after completing an Underground Pass quest, and I can't have 2 quests in progress at the same time. I've decided that during Ictharin's Little Helper and the Eyes of Glovery, getting a bucket of sap only allows me to train near evergreen trees, even though regular trees with a pointy top also give sap when using a knife on them. This is to limit the huge impact these quests would otherwise have, because otherwise I would have access to almost the entire RuneScape servers. Finally, there are a few one-time only things that could be called pseudo mini-quests, which are not listed as mini-quests, but do have some aspects in common, such as the fact that they can be done once and give a reward afterwards. These don't get counted as mini-quests, so must be done while having another objective near it. Barbarian training can only be done during Waterfall Quest. The Natural History Quiz reward can only be claimed during Bon Voyage, when gaining kudos is a requirement. I can only do the Camelot Night Training Grounds during the Ice of Gloughery or Ixflarin's Little Helper, at the point of getting the aforementioned bucket of sap from evergreen trees that grow just outside of the Camelot Castle. Having said that all, I hope the rules of my account are clear now, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos. If you're new to my channel, you can check out the first progress video by clicking on the end screen card or the info card in the top right corner to skip the rule explanation in that video. I hope you enjoy. See ya!